Good evening, everybody. Advertising management, the big picture, economic, ethical, and regulatory aspects. Tonight, we're going to relate advertising activities to the working of a free market economy, identify and give examples of the two main types of social criticisms of advertising, explain the difference between social responsibility and ethics in advertising, describe how governments regulate advertising here and abroad, discuss regulatory issues that affect U.S. advertisers and commercial speech, classify ways that federal agencies regulate advertising to protect both consumers and competitors, define the role state and local governments play in advertising regulation, list the ways that private organizations help reduce fraudulent and deceptive advertising. The many controversies about advertising. Advertising is praised and criticized. It's venerated and vilified. Controversies around economic role. Causes higher prices because advertising makes people want to buy things. Effect on consumer choice. Maybe people would not have chosen, but because they get pressured into it, bullied into it, especially around holiday time, different people in your family, young and old, pressure you for gifts, and that causes you to go into debt. We can go on and on. The flip side is, listen, you're an adult, and as an adult, you make your own decisions, and no one can decide for you. Nobody asks you to go into debt. No one asks you to pay high prices for products. Again, we could discuss the back and forth on that, but there are definitely controversies, and they definitely play into this. Controversies, again, around societal effects, makes consumers more materialistic, definitely. It skews their vision of what's important. Questions on where to locate responsibility, how much latitude should marketers have in that respect. Principles of free market economics, self-interest, complete information. Self-interest, everyone's trying to get a better deal. Complete information, people try to, it's easier to get complete information today because of the internet, so you have more information to make decisions. Many buyers and sellers, having many sellers ensures that if one doesn't meet customer needs, another seller will provide a more desirable product. Absence of externalities, this relates to social costs. The sale or consumption of products may benefit or harm other people not involved in the transaction or cause larger scale problems such as climate impacts. And that's where the government gets in with making all kinds of regulations to prevent climate issues and other issues. Another example is, gun control, where, we don't want people to be affected. We don't want people getting guns, but at the same time, we don't want people to lose their Second Amendment right. So there's a balance. The government gets involved with regulation, hopefully in a way that prevents the wrong people from getting weapons and causing harm to others. This framework helps us when considering how advertising may contribute to or detract from the basic goals of free enterprise, which is to provide the most good for the most people. And really, that's really what advertising and marketing should be doing. The economic impact of advertising, slide number 6, effect on value of products, gives brands added value. Positive images imply quality, but that may not always be true, and educates consumers about new uses for the product. And of course, this makes the product more desirable to consumers, which in turn increases the product's value. Slide 7, the economic effect of advertising. It's like opening the breaking shot in billiards. Advertising has a substantial impact. Ad expenditures account for 1 to 2% of the United States GDP. You can see here how advertising sets off a chain reaction among many elements of the economy, both for organizations and individuals. The first entry point is via the media, which reaches most consumers and most regular consumers and trade consumers. The advertising generated responses of these customers then affect the competitors, retailers, and distributors. The responses of these organizations then cascade across the organization down through the individual. And you could look at the exhibit 3-2 for yourself to see all the different players in this game of economic billiards. So for example, a company advertises a new snack food, consumers embrace it, retailers want more of it, manufacturers have to produce more of it, so they add one extra shift so employees then can earn overtime. And then you see the trickle-down effect of how things impact the economy. The economic impact of advertising, effect on prices, typically amounts spent on advertising minor compared with total cost of product. Many manufacturers can engage in mass production, which lowers unit cost of production. No effect on prices in industries subject to government regulation, because they regulate it. Price is a prominent element in many retail ads. Move on to the next slide. Advertising, sorry, I just moved the slide accidentally. Advertising and price. Does advertising lead to higher prices? Economists believe that in many cases, ads can actually contribute to lower prices for products because it engenders more competition. This ad for Southwest Airlines in slide number 9 is designed to attract price-sensitive customers to the savings they can get. Shows you can get a flight for $69. The economic impact of advertising: continued effect on competition. Some say small companies can't compete with large ones, budgets, or bigger companies. High costs may inhibit entry of new competitors. That's one of Porter's 5 forces. A single advertiser rarely large enough to dominate the entire country. Some companies may be eliminated due to successful advertising of their competitors because they just can't measure up. Larger companies with big ad budgets may make it difficult for new, smaller businesses to enter a market, particularly at the national level. Small companies can't afford the cost of advertising that will draw the attention from established efforts. How would a small company that invented a great new digital music player compete with Apple's advertising? It would not be able to, and of course would never make it. In regional markets, the playing field is more level. Smaller companies can compete effectively with both local and national competitors. Continuation of the economic impact of advertising: effect on consumer demand. No agreement on the extent that advertising plays on the consumer demand. You have primary demand and selective demand. In terms of customer demand, demand can be divided into 2 categories, as we said, primary and selective. Primary demand is demand for the entire product class, such as widescreen TVs or frozen pizza. Selective demand is demand for a particular brand, such as Sony, Bravia TV, or DiGiorno Pizza. By giving consumers information, advertising can stimulate primary demand for the entire product class. Advertising is particularly effective in driving selective demand in declining markets where consumers are focused on price. Conquest sales are shares of a particular consumer market. Businesses use advertising to compete for these shares to conquer them. Effect on consumer choice. Advertising promotes the existence of more sellers, which equates to wider choices for the consumer. In terms of consumer choice, consumers love choice. They have choice, and they're educated and know that they have it. So with these available choices, there's a product to suit everyone's taste. Being able to advertise encourages businesses to create a new product or improve existing products. Without advertising, why create a new product if consumers won't hear about it? An established brand that consumers embrace may force the demise of smaller brands, but this doesn't mean the market is locked up. A new and better product with effective advertising can be a new hit with consumers. The end result is that advertising helps to expand consumer choice. Slide number 13, the economic impact of advertising. Continued, the effect on the business cycle. Advertising helps sustain employment and economic growth by maintaining flow of consumer demand. Promotional expenditures cut during economic downturns. Advertising may act as a stabilizing force by encouraging consumers to buy. Let's consider how advertising affects the business cycle. John Kenneth Galbraith, an influential economist of the 20th century, was a critic of advertising, yet he understood that it can drive economic growth by encouraging customer demand. When economic conditions are poor, advertising budgets usually are cut to save money. However, this can further decrease consumer demand. Generally, when the business cycle is up, advertising contributes to economic growth by spurring demand. When the business cycle is down, advertising alone may not be able to spur economic growth, but it can help stabilize economic conditions by encouraging customers to buy product and services. The U.S. economy largely depends on consumer spending. In the Great Recession of 2009, how would the economy have been affected if all advertising had stopped? It would have been a disaster. Slide 14 shows you a slide of U.S. consumer demand. You could look at it for yourself. Slide 15, the economic impact of advertising continues. We'll talk about the abundance principle, the economic impact of advertising in perspective. In an economy that produces more goods than can be consumed, advertising serves 2 purposes: keeps consumers informed of their alternatives and allows companies to compete more effectively. We're not talking about subsistence anymore. That was thousands of years ago. Now we make more than we can use, so that's where advertising comes in. The abundance principle can help us to understand how and why advertising is important to the overall economy. A large economy like the U.S. produces more goods and services than potential buyers can consume. In this situation, advertising serves 2 important functions. It provides complete information by keeping consumers informed about available products and services, and it supports business self-interest by enabling them to compete more effectively. Remember that complete information and self-interest are core principles of a free market economy, and that's why the United States is so special in that respect. We move on to slide number 16. The social impact of advertising, deception in advertising, short-term manipulative criticisms. It's deceptive. Puffery includes exaggerated subjective claims, non-product facts that point out things about consumers in a social context. Two main social criticism, as we mentioned, is that there are short-term manipulative arguments and long-term macro arguments. Let's look at the first category. Short-term manipulative criticism focuses on the style of advertising and whether it deceives consumers or is unfair to competitors. Have you ever experienced deceptive advertising? What about those TV commercials that advertise a product for 3 easy payments of $29.95? You know, those infomercials. Then suddenly they say, but wait, they cut the price down to 2 easy payments. Is that deceptive? Issues that fall under this category include puffery. And what is puffery? As the name connotes, exaggerated subjective claims that can't be proven. We offer platinum service. What does that mean? False promises. In the 1960s, one company's commercials told kids that their sneakers would make them run faster and jump higher. Incomplete descriptions. A jacket advertises 100% cotton might actually have a synthetic lining. Or like a leather couch will have the part that you sit on as leather, but the back will be vinyl. Bait and switch. A sofa is advertised at a rock bottom price to draw in customers. Then they are offered an expensive sofa because the original one is out of stock. So you got them in and you extort. Visual distortion. Has everyone ever had a fast food burger that looks like the one advertised on TV? Have you ever seen tomatoes that red or lettuce that green or a burger that big? Of course not. They'll take a small burger bun and put in a regular piece of meat burger. Of course, that makes it look much bigger. False testimonials. Perhaps a doctor touts the health benefits of a breakfast cereal and claims he eats it every morning, though he really doesn't even like the taste or doesn't even want to look at the product. These tactics are not only deceptive to consumers, but they may create an unfair advantage over competitors who are honest in their advertising. Let's move on. Slide 17. Is this puffery? An ad for a chainsaw. You have a bunch of people on the chainsaw with all kinds of axes and looks like they are cutting. Oh, that's the way it looks over here. This chainsaw doesn't literally have small warriors. They look like a bunch of little, like from those, from the Capital One commercial. This chainsaw doesn't literally have small warriors marching along the blade. Of course, consumers recognize that this is exaggeration or puffery. Puffery may not be believable at a literal level, but bragging of this sort can serve as a metaphor for the benefits the brand is promoting. What benefits do you think this Stihl chainsaw is promoting for its chainsaw to this ad? It's making it look like it's a warrior's axe. It's tough, it's rugged, it's mean, it'll cut through anything. The social impact of advertising continued. The effect of advertising on our value system. Long-term macro criticisms. It degrades people's value systems by promoting materialism. It manipulates consumers by playing on their emotions, which is always an issue. The social impact of advertising. One common complaint, there's too much advertising. Ad clutter continues to increase in many media. Clutter more common in the U.S. Consider election year advertising. Look at that. Look at all the advertising that's going on now with the election. Slide number 20, the use of stereotypes in advertising. National advertisers becoming more sensitive to concerns of minorities and women. Image of women in ads changing for historical roles. Certain product categories still use stereotypes, of course. Parents find some ads offensive for their children to view. And taste influenced by geography. Depends where you live, your taste changes. Look at slide 21, eliminating stereotypes. Advertising sometimes perpetuates stereotypes, but it can also help dispel them. In this public service announcement from the Shelter Pet Project, people who believe animals end up in shelters because of behavioral problems are shown that pets may often end up through no fault of their own, only because nobody wants them. And of course, this ad is very, very important for animal lovers to realize that sheltered animals are not necessarily badly behaved or dysfunctional in any way. The social impact of advertising continued. Offensiveness in advertising, short-term style argument. Taste is highly subjective, subject to change, and geographic. If it is relevant to the product, people are less likely to regard it as obscene or offensive. Critics of advertising social impact would say that it offers consumers incomplete and biased information. It also creates externalities by potentially interfering with the media. For example, while a TV network that earns substantial advertising revenue from a car company airs a news story about a safety defect in a car company, will it air it? Will it not air it? Well, conflict of interest. Slide number 23. The social impact of advertising in perspective. It encourages development and speeds acceptance of new products and technologies. Fosters employment. Gives consumers a wider variety of choices. Mass production helps keep prices down. Stimulates healthy competition between producers. Slide number 24, social responsibility in advertising ethics. Ethical, doing what is morally right in a given situation. Social responsibility, doing what society views as best for the welfare of people. So ethics exists within a moral context for a given situation. It's your barometer. What do I do in a specific situation? Social responsibility refers to doing what is considered to be best for society in a situation and is an unwritten contract between business and society. Slide 25, more on social responsibility and advertising ethics. Advertising social responsibility in developed countries influences stability and growth, creates entertainment events, and can affect the outcome of political elections. Advertising clearly can be practiced in a responsible manner, producing a variety of benefits. Slide 26, continuation of social responsibility in advertising ethics. Ethics of advertising. Ethics comprises the traditional actions taken by people and the philosophical rules that society establishes. Individuals also face the attitudes, feelings, and beliefs that make up their personal value system. Are the concepts of good, bad, right, wrong, duty, integrity, and truth absolute or relative? The concept of ethical responsibility combines three components. For traditional actions of people in a society or community, these are known as customs. Letting a woman pass through a door first is a custom in our society, being chivalrous. Philosophical rules set by society to justify actions are known as principles. Being polite, respectful to older people is a general principle in the U.S. and in many countries for that matter. Personal attitudes about concepts such as good, bad, right, wrong, integrity, truth make up the third component of ethics. These three filters combine to form a vision of what constitutes ethical behavior. Slide 27. Social responsibility in advertising. Ethics continued. Ethics of advertising. Today, advertising is closely scrutinized and heavily regulated. Society believes that self-regulation of industry is not enough. Slide 28. Government restraints on international advertisers. Different perspectives. Europeans generally favor stricter controls. Many countries prohibit puffery. Many European countries ban coupons, premiums, and to add this, I read somewhere that Germany, they prevent kids from watching commercials at certain times because it can affect the way that they think and the way that they function, which is terrible. Slide 29, current regulatory issues affecting U.S. advertisers, freedom of commercial speech. Supreme Court distinguishes between speech and commercial speech. Numerous court cases on commercial speech. You have the Central Hudson Gas versus Public Service Commission provided guidelines. Doctors and dentists allowed to advertising began in 1982, and Sorrell versus IMS Health concerned data mining. So this chapter explores several key issues concerned with the regulation of advertising in the U.S. The first relates to the issue of speech. The U.S. Constitution protects our right for free speech, which today is being challenged. But is there a difference between personal speech and commercial speech? In 1976, the Supreme Court ruled Virginia State Board of Pharmacy versus Virginia Citizens Council that indeed advertising is protected as free speech under the First Amendment. Based on that decision, in 1982, the Supreme Court upheld the Federal Trade Commission order that allowed doctors and dentists to advertise. Today, it is common to see commercials for lawyers and, of course, doctors and dentists, which we see all the time. The Supreme Court ruled in 1976 that commercial speech is protected under the First Amendment, but does that mean advertising can say whatever they want? As part of the 1980 case, Central Hudson Gas versus Public Service Commission, the court set guidelines to help clarify when commercial speech can be regulated. The Central Hudson test lays out 4 criteria for commercial speech and regulation. The first criteria states that the ad in question must be for a legal product and make no misleading claims. The second point states that governments must prove that restricting a particular type of commercial speech will help to resolve an important problem. Consider this in the context of tobacco advertising. The third point stipulates that the government must establish conclusively that cessation of the commercial speech would be effective in remedying the problem being addressed by the government. Finally, the government must show that there are no alternative methods to achieve the same goal without restricting the commercial speech. Now, let's move on. Slide 30. Current regulatory issues affecting U.S. advertisers. The tobacco industry. 1998 court case imposed limits on promoting tobacco products. You don't see any commercials anymore on TV. Limits on promoting products at events with young attendees. Banned use of cartoon characters in ads, which of course bring children in. And current concerns over making e-cigarettes. Clearly, tobacco is a harmful product. TV advertising for cigarettes has been banned since 1970. States sued the tobacco industry to recover health costs, and in 1998 reached a settlement that further restricted tobacco advertising to help reduce smoking rates and the related health impacts. But do these restrictions impede on the free commercial speech of the tobacco industry? A new debate has begun over the health effects and advertising of e-cigarettes, which claim to be healthier, which of course we've heard that Juuls cause people to have all kinds of health issues. Slide 31. The issues of advertising to children. Children's Advertising Review Unit. Reviews and evaluates children-directed advertising in all media. Many other countries stricter than U.S. in terms of standards. We spoke about Germany as an example. Earlier, we saw that advertising messages can be deceptive, even for adults. Children today are consumers and often the sole decision makers for buying some products, but they have less of a capacity to full understanding the messaging and the intent of advertising. The Children's Advertising Review Unit, CARU, provides guidance and information to advertising agencies and the public on these issues. Slide 32. Consumer privacy. Privacy rights even more prominent with the advent of the internet, which of course makes it very difficult to keep your private business private. Web advertisers create cookies or use profiles to keep tabs on you. Internet companies argue that their tracking is not personal, but used to customize content for interests. For example, on YouTube, when you click on things, you have ads that are based on what you are interested in. Finally, consumer privacy rights are becoming a major concern due to the use of the internet and wireless devices. Advertisers can take extensive personal information on consumers via cookies installed via websites on personal computers. Real-time location data can be tracked from consumers' smartphones. Would you be bothered by an ad that popped up on your phone based on where you were? I would. Or would you be appreciated? I definitely wouldn't. The Fair Information Practice Principles of a Framework for Self-Regulation on Online Profiling. The 5 core elements focus on issues of notice, choice, access, security, and of course, enforcement. Slide number 33. Consumer privacy continued. Federal Trade Commission created a framework for self-regulation on online profiling. Fair information practices principles consist of 5 core elements, which you mentioned before: notice, choice, access, security, and enforcement. Slide 34. Protecting consumer data. Staggering number of people have been affected by data breaches. We had it with Target several years ago. Companies struggle to protect their customers and employees. Industry and government challenge to keep pace with technology. Slide number 35. The U.S. Federal Trade Commission, major regulator for products sold in interstate commerce. Definition of deceptive and unfair advertising are controversial. Deceptive advertising: ad that contains a representation, omission of practice that is likely to mislead the consumer. Unfair advertising occurs when a consumer is unjustifiably injured or there is a violation of public policy. Slide 36, comparative advertising. Advertising Advertisers used to claim superiority to competition must compare some objectively measured characteristic, and of course is very prone to falsification and can get you into trouble. That's why you have to have everything fact-checked beforehand. Slide 37, investigation suspecting violations. The FTC looks for 3 kinds of information: substantiation, endorsements, and of course affirmative disclosures. Remedies for unfair or deceptive advertising. FTC has 3 courses of action: consent decree, cease and desist order, and corrective advertising. Celebrity endorsement. This ad for Smart Water relates, this is slide number 39, This ad for smart water relates to several interesting issues in advertising. From a legal perspective, federal law requires that celebrity endorsers actually use the product. From a creative perspective, this ad demonstrates that a woman's physical appeal can indeed be used to market water. Now, in truth, ethically, okay, having this woman, because men are attracted to women, having this as an ad will cause more water to be bought. But it's unethical because it debases a woman. It puts her in a negative light. But unfortunately, in our society that we live in, which unfortunately is not necessarily the most moral society, it's in many cases amoral, zero morals. These kind of ads are commonplace, and unfortunately, women are used in an inappropriate way, and we have to be very careful and respect women's rights and not use them use their pictures incorrectly. Government regulation of advertising in North America. The FDA, Food and Drug Administration, monitors the manufacture, import, transport, storage, and sale of over $1 trillion worth of products annually. Requires manufacturers to disclose all ingredients on labels. In 1997, allowed pharmaceutical companies to advertise and only had to mention side effects and direct consumers to internet sites for more information. National Labeling and Educational Act, which basically forces everyone, to fess up with respect to what they're putting into foods. And this is very, very important. This way, when you can make your food choices in a smart way. In 1997, you have to remember that pharmaceutical companies went through a lot of upheaval, and the fact that side effects had to be mentioned is a big deal, because for many years it wasn't done. Slide 41, the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, independent federal agency with jurisdiction over radio, television, telephone, satellite, internet, and cable TV. Stringent controls arising of obscenity and profanity, deregulated radio and TV stations in the 1980s, and promotes the common good. Slide 42, government regulation advertising in North America. The Patent and Trademark Office of the Library of Congress registers and protects intellectual property, patent, trademarks, and copyrights. So the Patent and Trademark Office works to protect the economic well-being or self-interest of citizens by protecting their intellectual property, which in turn protects their economic well-being. Examples of intellectual property might be the technique for developing a generic medicine or new product that allows you to get all the ketchup out of the bottle. Intellectual property is protected through the use of patents and trademarks. Coca-Cola is trademarked. The Coca-Cola trademark, everyone is familiar with trademarks. We are exposed to them every day. Some have become iconic, like the Nike swoosh. Trademarks are used to identify products and distinguish them from competitors. They are a form of protection offered by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Look at some of these trademarks for Coca-Cola. If you were in an Arab or Asian country and didn't know the native language, you would probably still recognize Coca-Cola based on the font and colors. And of course, you'd be able to know what they're selling. State and local regulation by state governments, often based on truth in advertising model developed in 1911 by Printers Inc. States vary in regulations regarding what can be established. Although state laws on advertising vary, they are usually based on a truth in advertising model statute developed in 1911 by a trade publication called Printers Inc. This model stated that anyone who creates untrue, deceptive, or misleading advertising is guilty of a misdemeanor. Most state laws reflect this model. Earlier, we talked about the FTC, known as the Federal Trade Commission. Most states have laws known informally as little FTC acts that address unfair business practices and protect consumers. Some states will combine efforts to enforce these laws. Regulations about what can be advertised differ from state to state. This can create problems for national marketers who want to develop a unified advertising strategy across all 50 states, because these advertisers must comply with state law, and that's hard when you have a little bit of variation in laws. Regulation by governments, protect local consumers against unfair practices by local merchants. Finally, at the local level, cities and counties may have agencies to protect consumers against unfair practices, mainly focusing on local merchant activities. As you can see, there are many layers of government regulation on advertising. Non-government regulation: the Better Business Bureau, largest U.S. business monitoring organization, funded by dues from members' companies, and files on violators open to public. So if somebody is violating good business practice and honesty, people know about it. The BBB, the Better Business Bureau, is a member organization that monitors business activity, has published a code of advertising that is considered to be the most important tool for self-regulation by advertisers. The BBB also works with law enforcement to prosecute advertisers who practice fraud or misrepresentation. Slide 47. The Advertising Self-Regulatory Council, ASRC, established in 1971, promotes and enforces standards of truth, accuracy, taste, morality, and social responsibility. The ASRC is the operating arms, and the NARB reviews the process. The National Advertising Review Council is dedicated to enforcing standards of truth, accuracy, taste, morality, and social responsibility in advertising. The NARC's National Advertising Division monitors advertising practices, reviews complaints, and directs advertisers to modify or discontinue poor practice. The NARB serves to review appeals to NAD decisions. Slide 48, seal of approval, Good Housekeeping since 1909. To help consumers make informed decisions, scientists at the Good Housekeeping Research Institute evaluate products before they are accepted for publication in Good Housekeeping magazine, as well as for the Good Housekeeping seal. This gives consumers a trustworthy, authoritative voice to listen to when making purchasing decisions. Slide 49. Non-government regulation. Regulation by the media, internet, IAB, and AAA. Television has strict reviews of ads, as the strictest. Radio, every station typically has its own unwritten guidelines. Magazines, national groups monitor all ads. Newspapers, acceptability guidelines. The media, including internet, TV, magazine, and newspapers, have various rules and practices to regulate advertising presented through their various channels. Many people think media regulation is more effective than the government's. Slide 50. Non-government regulation continued. Regulation by consumer groups. Consumer information networks help develop consumer organizations and work with consumer groups. Consumer advocates investigate advertising complaints, investigate advertising issues. Consumerism, social action focused on the rights of the buying public, gained influence in the 1960s. Today, consumers' information networks and advocacy groups put considerable pressures on advertisers. Self-regulatory issues by advertisers. Large firms gather data to substantiate claims, incorporate systems of advertising review, and many industries maintain advertising codes. Finally, the advertising industry monitors its own practices. It's better to address a potential problem in-house than to run afoul of government regulation to get exposed in the public or angry consumer groups down the line. This can be done at the agency level or by industry association. Self-regulation by ad agencies and associations. Agencies must research and verify product claims. Agencies can be held legally responsible for fraudulent claims. Advertising associations, American Association of Advertising Agencies, American Advertising Federation, and the Association of National Advertisers are all examples of that. Okay, the next couple of slides are the appendices, which basically go over all the charts that we spoke about. For example, the billiard ball, and goes through a narrative of what that is. It talks about the graph that we showed, where U.S. consumer spending starts at just over 10,500 in 2008, drops to under that in 2009. It gives you a narrative over there, and we don't need to do that because we already spoke about it. Thank you so much for joining tonight, and have a safe evening. Be well, stay safe.